What kind of man gives away the last water he has left? That question burned through Silas Everheart's mind on the driest morning the land had ever known. The earth had forgotten what rain felt like. 100 days without a single drop had turned the ground into something closer to bone than soil. The sun rose angry every morning, and today was no different. Silas stood beside his empty water barrel, staring at the rust at the bottom like it might magically turn into water if he begged hard enough. It didn't. He had only 2 canteens left. 2 metal containers that held maybe 3 days of life if he barely moved and breathed slow. But the desert didn't care about careful plans. Out here, you either had water or you had a grave. Silas lifted one canteen and felt the weight. Heavy, but not heavy enough. His lips were cracked, bleeding at the corners. As he took 3 small sips, he closed his eyes. The water tasted like metal, but it was life. He capped it again with the care of a man holding something sacred. Inside the cabin behind him, dust covered everything. His wife Martha had died 3 years ago, in the bedroom that still smelled like her perfume if he imagined hard enough. He stayed on this ranch because leaving had felt like betraying her. Now he wondered if staying had only been the slowest way to follow her. He walked outside again. His boots crunched on the dry dirt that sounded like breaking glass. The sky above him stretched empty, a hard blue bowl with no sign of hope. His last 5 cattle lay collapsed near the fence line. He hadn't been strong enough to bury them. The land would take them back soon enough. Silas leaned against the fence post, his bones aching under his sunburned skin. He thought about the letters he never wrote to his brother back east, the grandchildren he would never meet. The fact that when he died out here, nobody would know for weeks. Then he saw it, a shape near the southern fence, something small, something that didn't belong. Silas squinted through the burning light. About 50 yards out, something was lying in the dirt, half hidden under the thin shadow of a dying bush. He grabbed his second canteen without thinking. His feet moved forward on their own, each step stealing from the little strength he had left. As he got closer, his breath caught. It wasn't an animal. It was a girl, a child. She lay curled on her side, her long black hair tangled with dry brush, her clothes coated in dust. Her skin looked burned from the sun, lips cracked, eyes closed. Silas dropped to his knees, ignoring the pain shooting through them. She was Apache, maybe 10 or 12 years old. He touched 2 fingers to her neck, a pulse, weak and uneven, but still there, alive. Barely. She had walked far. Too far. Her hands were scraped, fingernails broken. She must have crawled before collapsing. Maybe she'd been separated from her people during one of the dust storms. Silas looked back toward the cabin, then down at the girl, then at the canteen in his hand. This was the math of survival, cold and simple. 2 canteens meant maybe 72 hours of life. The girl needed water now, or she would be dead before sunset. If he gave her half, he would lose half his time. If he gave her everything, he would lose everything. His wife's voice came to him, soft, steady, the one memory he could never shake. The measure of a man isn't what he does when it costs nothing. It's what he does when it costs everything. He never believed those words. Out here, sentiment could kill you. But now there was a child dying at his feet. He uncapped the canteen and touched it to her lips. Her eyelids fluttered. She choked at first, then drank in slow, steady pulls. She understood thirst. She understood life or death. When half the canteen was gone, Silas pulled it back. She reached weakly for it, but he shook his head. "That's all for now," he whispered. "Too much will hurt you." She didn't understand the words, but she understood his voice. He lifted her gently. She was shockingly light. Nothing but bones wrapped in determination. Step by step, he carried her toward the cabin, sweating out more water than his body could spare. Inside, he set her in the deepest shade. She slumped against the wall, eyes half open but unfocused. When she pointed toward the canteens with a trembling hand, he understood what she was asking. More. She needed more. Silas held the half-empty canteen to her again. She finished it, drinking until no drops were left. She looked at him again, desperate, still dying, just slower now. He stared at the second canteen, his last, the thing keeping him alive. He picked it up, uncapped it. The girl shook her head. She knew. She understood what it meant for him to give it to her. "Drink," Silas said. He pressed it to her lips. She drank slowly, her breathing steadying, her face taking back a little color. When she was strong enough, she reached for her necklace, a small piece made of beads and bone, and placed it in his hand. A gift. A promise. A debt. Silas tried to give it back, but she pushed his hand closed around it. As evening came and the worst heat faded, she stood. Her legs held. She pointed to the south. "Your people," Silas murmured. She nodded. She pressed her hand to her heart, then pointed at him. A gesture beyond language. Then she walked away into the dying light. Silas watched her disappear over the ridge. He went back inside, looked at the quarter canteen left. He had saved her life and given away his own. He sat in the dark cabin, holding the necklace, barely able to breathe. Night settled like a heavy blanket. His body trembled from dehydration. He drifted in and out of consciousness, fighting sleep and the pull of death. Hours passed. Then, near dawn, a sound rose from the earth. Horses. Dozens. No, hundreds. Silas opened his eyes, heart pounding weakly. The Apache were coming. And they were coming for him. Silas pushed himself up from the chair, dizzy and shaking. His legs felt like they were made of hollow wood. The sound outside grew louder. Hooves. So many hooves, it felt like the earth itself was moving. He gripped the table and staggered toward the window. When he pulled back the curtain, his breath caught in his dry throat. They were everywhere. Apache warriors covered the hills in every direction. 300 riders, maybe more. They filled the valley, lined the ridges, circled his cabin with the silence of people who did not need to announce their presence. The rising sun painted their figures in orange and gold. They sat their horses like carved stone. No movement, no shouting, no threats. Just watching. He had heard stories his entire life. Settlers wiped out, ranches burned, families gone in minutes. If they believed he had harmed the girl, there would be no mercy. If they believed he had taken her or scared her or weakened her, he would not survive the next few minutes. His mouth was so dry, he could barely swallow. He turned from the window, grabbed the girl's necklace from the table and hung it around his neck. Maybe it meant something. Maybe it would help them understand. Or maybe they'd see it as theft. Silas stepped outside. The morning light blinded him for a moment. The world spun. His legs gave out, and he dropped to his knees in the dirt. But he stayed upright, head lifted toward the riders. 30 yards away, one warrior nudged his horse forward. He was older than the others, with streaks of gray in his hair and a scar along his jaw. His presence felt solid and powerful, like someone born to lead. The riders stayed still behind him as he dismounted and walked toward Silas. Silas's heart thudded weakly. He had no weapon drawn, no strength left to fight. He could only watch as the leader approached. The man stopped right in front of him. He reached into a pouch on his belt and pulled out a small piece of beaded necklace, the same pattern as the one around Silas's neck. He held it up. Then he pointed at Silas's chest. Silas lifted the necklace so the leader could see it. The man studied it, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded once. A heavy nod. A nod that seemed to carry meaning beyond anything Silas understood. The leader knelt, so they were eye level. Slowly he reached out and touched Silas's necklace, comparing it with his own piece. His thumb moved over the beads like he was touching something sacred. Then, unexpectedly, the leader did something Silas had not expected from anyone at all. He smiled. Just a small one, but enough. He pressed his hand to his own chest, then pointed toward the southern ridge, the same direction the girl had walked. She made it home. She survived. She told them everything. 2 younger warriors stepped forward, carrying a large water skin between them. It dripped from the outside like it had been filled from a river that still flowed somewhere far from here. They set it down in front of Silas. The leader opened it and lifted it up to Silas's lips. Water. Cold, clean, real water. Silas drank. He forced himself to sip slow, even though his body screamed to gulp. Every swallow felt like life coming back to him drop by drop. When he lowered the water skin, he gasped, shaking. The leader spoke in his own language. His voice was deep, steady, carrying something like respect. A young warrior stepped forward and translated in broken English. "Grandfather says," girl told us, "you gave last water. Last water is sacred. When a man gives life, life must return." Silas felt something tighten in his throat. He didn't know what to say. He didn't have the strength, even if he tried. Suddenly, the leader raised his voice in a sharp command. All 300 riders moved at once. They dismounted in perfect unison. The sound of hundreds of boots hitting the earth echoed through the valley. They pulled tools from their saddlebags, digging sticks, hand-carved shovels, baskets. Silas watched in confusion as they walked toward a spot near his cabin and started clearing the brush. They moved with purpose. No one argued. Everyone knew what to do. The leader knelt in front of Silas again and began drawing in the dirt. A circle, lines going downward, a deep hole. Then he pointed at the ground where his men were gathering and made a digging motion. Silas blinked. "A well?" he whispered. The young warrior translated the leader's next words. "Earth remembers water deep, we dig deep." It hit Silas like a hammer. They weren't here to punish him. They weren't here to take anything. They weren't here for revenge. They were here to return what he had given. Water for water. Life for life. The digging began fast and focused. 300 people working as one. They dug in a perfect circle, wide at first, then narrower as they went deeper. Dirt flew out in baskets. Workers rotated without being told, moving like a single machine. Silas tried to stand and help, but the leader stopped him gently, placing the water skin in his hands again. "Rest," the young man translated. "This work is ours." Hours passed. The hole grew deeper. The sound of tools hitting earth echoed across the valley. At 15 feet, the soil darkened. At 20 feet, it became damp. A shout burst from below. Voices rose in excitement. They found mud. Real mud. Wet mud. Water was close. Silas forced himself to stand, leaning on the porch railing as he stepped forward. He reached the edge and looked down. Bottom of the pit. A small, dark pool. Water. The earth hadn't given up after all. It just hid its life deeper than anyone Silas knew could reach. But the Apache could. They built walls inside the hole to prevent collapse. They lined it with stone. They created a wooden frame to hold the rope and bucket. By afternoon, the pool at the bottom grew deeper. By evening, the well was full enough to draw water. Silas watched as the leader lowered a bucket, pulled it up, and handed it to him. Cold, clean water filled the wooden bucket. Silas drank until tears ran down the dust on his cheeks. The land that was dying lived again. The Apache began packing to leave. Before they did, several warriors placed leather bundles near the well. Tools, rope, seeds, food. Then the girl came forward, healthy, alive, smiling. She wrapped her arms around Silas's neck. He felt her gratitude in the strength of her embrace. Her father stepped forward. He pressed another beaded piece into Silas's palm. The young warrior translated, "Grandfather says, you are family now. If danger comes, send word. We will return." The Apache mounted their horses, forming long lines across the land. The leader raised his hand. 300 riders moved as one and disappeared over the ridge. Silas stood beside the well, holding the necklace, feeling the weight of what had happened. One small act had saved him. One small act had returned a river. Silas stood beside the new well, long after the Apache riders vanished over the southern ridge. The wind carried dust across the empty land, but it felt different now. Softer, almost gentle, as if the land itself knew something had changed. The well stood tall and solid, its wooden frame strong enough to last for generations. Silas ran his hand across the edge, feeling the cool moisture rising from below. He lowered the bucket again and listened to the sound of water splashing inside, a sound he feared he would never hear again. He pulled the bucket up and stared into it, hardly believing it. Clear water caught the late evening light and shone like liquid silver. He drank until the ache in his throat finally eased, and his body remembered what life felt like. When he finished, he carried the bucket to the patch where Martha's garden had once grown. He poured water onto the dry soil. The ground darkened instantly, soaking it in like something starving. "Martha," he whispered, "we got water again." He returned to the well, filled another bucket, and walked the same path, over and over, watering every part of the old garden. The sun slipped low, painting the sky red behind the hills, but Silas kept working. He didn't feel tired anymore. The air didn't crush him. His chest didn't feel like stone. Water gave life faster than anything else could. By nightfall, every barrel he owned was full. Every bucket, too. He stored water in metal pots, in jugs, in anything that could hold a drop. For the first time in months, he felt safe. That night, he slept in his cabin without feeling death breathing over his shoulder. In the morning, Silas stepped outside and saw something he hadn't seen in months. Birds. Small ones. A few sparrows pecking near the well, drawn by the scent of water. The land had begun to wake up. The days passed one by one, and each morning Silas watered the garden. He planted seeds the Apache had gifted him, corn, beans, squash, to honor the kindness they had shown. The soil softened. The garden darkened. Little green shoots pushed through the earth like tiny promises. He found himself talking to Martha again, telling her everything. How the Apache arrived, how they saved his life, how he gave away his last water and somehow lived to see rain in the ground. The ranch healed slowly, like an old body remembering how to breathe. When rain finally returned months later, the well didn't slow. It kept flowing strong and steady. The aquifer ran deep, untouched by drought. Silas filled every barrel again, smiling the whole time. He rebuilt his fences. He repaired the cabin door. He gathered enough feed to raise cattle again. Soon, the land was alive the way it had been years ago. Maybe better. People passing through started to notice. Travelers came up the road asking for water. Their horses thin, their lips cracked from the long ride. Silas never refused. He filled their canteens, helped their horses drink, gave them food when he had extra. When they asked why he was so generous, Silas touched the beaded necklace he always wore and told them the truth. "One day, I gave away the last water I had left, and the next day her whole tribe returned it 100 times over." He never shared the whole story unless someone truly wanted to listen. Most people just nodded and rode on, grateful and curious, but some stayed for the tale, and he told it slowly, with respect. Years passed, and Silas grew older, his hair turning white, his steps slowing, but his land remained green. The well never dried. Travelers continued to come, and word spread that the Everheart Ranch always had water, no matter the season. One warm evening, as the sun lowered behind the hills, a rider appeared on the horizon. Silas watched from his porch, recognizing the pattern on the rider's buckskin shirt. Apache. When the horse stopped near him, Silas stood, holding the edge of the porch for balance. The rider was a young woman now, maybe 18 or 19, with the same dark eyes he remembered, the same eyes of the girl he'd saved. She dismounted with a soft smile, walked forward, and placed her hand on his shoulder. She still wore her beaded necklace. She pointed at his. The matching pieces glowed in the golden light. She said something in her language, soft, warm, full of meaning. Silas didn't understand the words, but he understood the feeling. Gratitude, respect, family. She handed him a small pouch containing new seeds, stronger ones, able to grow even if the land turned harsh again. Another gift, another promise, another reminder that kindness ripples far beyond the moment it is given. Then she mounted her horse again, nodded once, and rode toward the horizon. Silas stood watching until she disappeared into the evening. He turned back toward his home, his land, his well. The water still flowed, the garden still grew. The world still remembered the day he gave away everything he had. And the day 300 riders showed up to give it back.